Hi, I'm Mike, owner of The In-Groove in Phoenix, Arizona. Today I'm going to do another video showing you guys what's going into my collection this week. This is the third one of these that I've actually done. I've really enjoyed doing them. It gives me kind of an opportunity to talk about some stuff that is outside of the norm of what everybody else is talking about. Unfortunately, this week, I've got a lot of records that are brand new that I haven't talked about in detail that I'm adding into my collection, so I'm going to be talking about records that a lot of other people are already talking about. Starting with Alice Coltrane's Ptah, the El Duad. This is a title I thought for sure was going to be a Analog Productions Impulse title, you know, part of that series that they've been working on. I know Chad doesn't like avant-garde music, but it seemed to me like this was something that I felt like he would have done. He ended up doing Pharoah Sanders' Karma instead. I'm not 100% sure why. That's not nearly as good a sounding record as this one is. But, you know, the Alice Coltrane catalog has really been significantly neglected. There were some Impulse titles in print a while back, but they weren't that good sounding. They were noisy, crummy vinyl. The sound was mediocre. So I was looking for something to really put those records back into print, get them sounding good. And what does Verve do? They institute the Verve by Request. It's a series that actually got started in the 80s. I think it went from like the mid-80s to the 90s. We've got Verve by Request, and this record sounds great. I actually compared this against my original. This is a very expensive record, very difficult to get, and even more difficult to get clean. Now, this is a visually clean copy, but it still plays a little on the noisy side. So this was done by Ryan K. Smith at Sterling. It sounds fantastic. It's a great sounding record. I can't speak more highly about this record. Another thing is too, part of the series hype is cut from the original analog sources when available. I'm not sure when and when it's not available. You know, they're not telling us. So it's kind of like, hey, every now and then we're going to give you an analog record. That's kind of a bummer. I wish they would just flat out tell us. But either way, this record sounds fantastic. So, yeah. Okay. This is the second title from that series. This was a record that I wasn't really familiar with. Originals go for big money. It's got Blue Mitchell on it. But yeah, it's Roy Brooks, Beat. This is the second title in the Verve by Request series. This is on, originally it looks like it's on Workshop Jazz. But this musically a good record. I don't think it has the same sonic quality as the Alice Coltrane, although it's still a really good sounding record. But I don't have an original of this to compare it with, like I did the Alice Coltrane. But musically, it's good enough that I put it in my... It's not a bad sounding record by any stretch of the imagination. It's still a really good sounding record, but in the era of like Tone Poets and some of these Impulse reissues, you know, you get used to like 10s, and then when you get like an 8 or a 9 sonically, you're a little bit put off. But it's a really good record. I recommend both of them if you're a jazz fan. That Roy Brooks, give that a listen to. That's really good. Okay, so this I'm not really sure if I have. I feel like I probably already have this record. If I don't have, this is let me show you. This is an Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers, my favorite jazz album of all time. This is kind of like a transition copy, like a 2.5 pressing. So the originals were the West 63rd address, like you see on the label there, right? They were deep groove, and they didn't have the registered trademark underneath the E on Blue Note. This particular copy is not a deep groove. It does not have it has the registered trademark, but it has two different labels. Side 1 is a West 63rd. Side 2 is just the New York address. Again, it is my favorite jazz album of all time. This is a really, really clean copy. I just love this record so much, and it's just one of those records that I get in every single variation I possibly can. I've got multiple first pressings, second pressings, transition copies, third pressings. I've got Liberty, United Artists. Oh, I love the record, and I enjoy collecting it. I'm fanatical about Pink Floyd records like that, some Led Zeppelin records. This is probably the only jazz record that I get that crazy about, but it's a record I love. Johnny Cash. The Man Comes Around. This is volume 4. This is an original copy. It came into the store on a collection buy here recently in the shrink. I own this record, but I don't know where it is. It's in a box somewhere in the store, in my garage, in my storage room. I remember right before I moved, I was doing some remodeling and I had to move out of the house temporarily till the house could get gutted and redone. And when I moved back into the house, the place I was at, the very last record I listened to was actually this record. For whatever reason, I don't know where it is, but I found another copy to bring home, listen to. It's actually my favorite of the series, volume 4. This has Personal Jesus on it, which I think, when you hear Johnny Cash doing Depeche Mode, it's just, but it's so good. The song has a whole different meaning, kind of the way he does it, his tone in it. It's a great sounding record. It's a great musically the record. I mean, it's that series resurrected Johnny Cash's career. It's fantastic. But I just needed that until I could find my other copy. But to be honest, that's a perfect copy. If my other copy is even as good as that, it doesn't matter. I'll put it in the store for sale. Another record that I seem to collect a lot of, I have the original. I have multiple classic records, Analog Productions. That's Ensor May's The Royal Ballet. This is just one of my favorite classical records. Swan Lake, The Nutcracker, Sleeping Beauty. It's a fantastic sounding record. It's a very collectible record. The only thing I would say of this, of significance, that I'm missing is Classic Records actually replicated the original box that this came in, which is actually what the UHQR is modeled after. I don't have that. I have like the Clarity single-sided box set. I think it's 9 LPs. I've got the non-Clarity version. I've got all these permutations of this record, but I don't have that one, which I think is probably the coolest of the reissues that were ever done. But I didn't have, that's just the standard, I think 200 gram vinyl version. I didn't have that, so figured I'd throw that in the collection. This is a record I've talked about quite a few times on the channel. It's on my top 100 imprint analog records you should own list. That is Curtis Mayfield's Superfly. Disc 1 is all analog, cut by Kevin Gray. Although it sounds fantastic, I actually find myself listening to Disc 2 quite a bit more, I think. It's got instrumentals, radio spots, edits, single mixes. It's just, a lot of those tracks are really good, but it's a fantastic sounding record. I enjoy it. I use it now as a demo record in my sound room at the shop. But this is me finally cleaning it, bringing it home, and putting it on the shelf. The last record released by Mobile Fidelity, we've got Thriller coming up this week. The one step, but Elvis's Blue Hawaii. Elvis is my absolute favorite artist of all time, hands down. Grew up loving Elvis, love Elvis to this day. He's the man, right? Okay, so I listened to the upcoming one step of Elvis in Memphis when I was in Sebastopol. Sounded really good. But this sounds fantastic. That sounded really good there. How it's going to sound when I get the final production copy in my hands, I have no idea. But Blue Hawaii, probably, I think this is his best movie soundtrack, right? It has I Can't Help Falling in Love, which was the closer pretty much for all of his concerts from the late 60s to the 70s. I would say the majority of his concerts were closed with this. But this record, I tell you, when I listened to this, I almost got like a little emotional listening to I Can't Help Falling in Love. I mean, it was just unbelievably good. I really hope these Elvis reissues, including the upcoming Elvis in Memphis, are absolute home runs. Maybe that'll incentivize them to do some more Elvis titles. I know, before the movie, Elvis was a difficult sell. It was a difficult sell in the store. I noticed quite a bit pick up since the movie came out. I want to say my Elvis bin, which was probably around this many records, is like half the size now. So Elvis is moving now. I really hope Mobile Fidelity gives more Elvis titles a look. This sounds absolutely fantastic. It's quad DSD, but it's just fantastic. I can't speak more highly of this record. There's so many good Elvis records that need this treatment. But for now, we've got Elvis Blue Hawaii. 45 RPM. Okay, the next one, here's an OG. Bought a collection a while back. I showed you quite a few records out of it. I'm still going through it, still working on it, but I've got a copy of Relaxin' with the Miles Davis Quintet. I'm pretty sure I have this record in my collection already. Actually, I'm 100% sure because I've already pulled it out. I think this, at least cover-wise, is going to be a better copy. Very, very clean cover. The only problem it has on it, it has this little chip on the top, but I still think this is better than the cover I have in my collection. So at the very least, I'll swap covers. One of these will make its way back to the store. I'm constantly doing that, improving the condition of what I have in my collection, although it's pretty high to begin with. If it's an identical record, now if there's any variance whatsoever, it's a later pressing, I don't do that, but it's only if it's 100% an identical collection, issue, I'll do a cover swap or a record swap. These were, oh my God, this next two records, they've been the bane of my existence for the last year. So, two Speakers Corner titles. The first one, Mingus, oh yeah. Speakers Corner, the founder and retired, right? So they've been operating, I think 30 years. They retired. They're still kind of running the business, but everything as far as distribution, they have a third party doing now. So there was like a point in time where we were going through like a nickel shortage. So that was kind of hampering their new releases. And then they went through that distribution change, and that was kind of a little bit of an issue because the people that they passed it off to didn't have the infrastructure set up to handle ordering in English. So that kind of delayed it a little bit. But I think this record on its own got a little bit of a natural delay. But it finally came out. I had pre-orders on it. They're all shipped. We're done. But Charlie Mingus. Oh yeah. Okay, so we got Mingus and we have Alice Coltrane's Eternity. Both of these are actually mastered by Kevin Gray. Speakers Corner always uses analog tapes, barring Alan Parsons' Eye in the Sky. That was not an analog tape, but they've acknowledged that. But everything they use is analog. A lot of times they'll get safety copies, one off of the master tape and make records from that. Sometimes they'll get somebody like Kevin Gray to cut probably cut from the original master tape. Both of these are Kevin Gray cut. They're at least analog tapes. We don't know exactly what the generation is. That's not something Speakers Corner has ever released. This record sounds really good, Eternity, right? So I compared Eternity to, I've got a really clean original. Consequently, this is actually my favorite Alice Coltrane record. I absolutely love this record. I play it all the time at the house. I play it all the time at the store. Los Cabellos is my favorite Alice Coltrane track on my favorite Alice Coltrane album. I actually saw Ravi Coltrane, her son, play at the Village Vanguard about a year ago in New York, and he actually played some of that. Like, what are the odds? Like, my favorite track, right, by Alice Coltrane, and like this little set, impromptu set, hour and a half set out of all the stuff he could pull from. His own stuff, his mother's stuff, his father's stuff. He does my favorite track from my favorite Alice Coltrane record. It was awesome. But anyways, this is actually a pretty good sounding record. And this Alice Coltrane here is a pretty good sounding record. It's a little bit more, the Speakers Corner is a little more bassy. Probably something that was cut from the original just due to tracking limitations of the time. Alice Coltrane played the organ, and there's a couple tracks. Wisdom Eye, I think, yeah, side one. The beginning track on side two is Wisdom Eye. It kind of has that prolonged, almost organ drone, and I feel like the original, they might have cut the bass a little bit. Actually, I can tell you for a fact. I know they cut the bass, and I'll tell you why in a second. But this is one of those records that sounds good, but I know can sound so much better. How do I know it can sound so much better? So I have an original here, right? I have the Kevin Gray cut, but I've heard it in the best way you can possibly hear it. So I was buying a collection from the legendary jazz producer Ed Michel. I've told this story a few times. I bought his jazz collection. He actually is the producer on this record. He's credited somewhere here. Produced by Ed Michel, right? Actually, he's he's credited on both of these, right? So I bought his collection. I bought his record collection. I go to his house. I look on his right wall, and what does he have on his right wall that he's also selling? His master tape, or excuse me, his tape archive. A lot of unreleased stuff, a lot of safety tapes, that kind of thing. What do I see? Off to the side on Ed Michel's house? Why, it's Alice Coltrane, Eternity. This is the Safety Master. This is from Westlake Audio, where it was recorded. This is box number 2, which has Om Supreme. I'm a huge tape guy. There is tape 1. So I've heard the safety tape. And holy shit, does it sound good. It is an unbelievable sounding record. The record, unfortunately, the original, The Speaker's Corner, doesn't do this any justice. This really needs to be, like a 45 RPM, and if it's, I don't know what they're using over there at Warner for tape-wise, but I know what this sounds like, and this tape sounds unbelievable. Let's see, this is a Tones at Head, non-Dolby. So this is a Dolby toned. One of the things that I learned about this record that Ed Michel told me, and I was telling him about how it was my favorite record, and I truly loved it, and we're going on and on and on, we're geeking out. I'm geeking out. He's like, oh yeah, that's a quad record. And I'm like, no, that's not a quad. That record's not in quad. This is how I found the tape, by the way. He's like, no, that record's in quad. I'm like, no, I've got that record. It's not in quad. There's no quad. You look on the record here, you look on the original. Like, you're not going to find, it doesn't reference, let's see. Yeah, it doesn't reference quad anywhere on here. He goes, no, I know for a fact it's in quad. I made it, Mike. I'm the producer of the record. He goes, look, I'll show you. He walks over, he pulls out the master tape, and he goes, look, they're encoded. They're all quad encoded. All the master tapes are quad encoded. Look at that in there. Pulls it out and shows it to me, and I'm like, I guess they're quad encoded, Ed. You would know. We're looking at the tape, but I don't have a quad system to test that theory out on. But if you have a quad system and it is encoded in quad, let me know. I know the master tape is. But I've heard that master tape. I played it once. I've got another machine. I'm going to run off a copy of it. I just haven't done it yet. But an unbelievably high level of quality comes off of that master tape as compared to the original. But the original is still what I listen to, and that Speaker's Corner is good as well. Okay, Bobby Hutcherson. This is a Blue Note. I think this is an actual Blue Note Plastilite pressing. What is this? Actually, this is 8423. This might have... Okay, so no, this is a Liberty pressing, because this does not have the Plastilite. This is not an easy record to get. I do not have... I think Music Matters did it. I think I have a Music Matters version of this record, and I don't think I have any other versions of this record until now. This came out of that same jazz collection. But Bobby Hutcherson's Happenings. There were some of those records that are right around this time frame that never came out as anything but Liberty pressings. That might be one of them. I'm not sure. I have to look it up online. All right, Clifford Brown Memorial Album. This is from that same collection. I'm still going through it. This is a slightly later pressing. Has the real nice high quality laminate cover, but this is probably early 60s. It's a Plastilite pressing, Deep Groove side 1, not side 2, New York labels, but pretty much in EX to near mint condition. It's a pretty immaculate record. You can look at the cover and kind of just see what kind of condition this record was kept. But I've got multiple versions of this. Music Matters has done it as well. Here's another. I'm making a run and have been for a decade. It seems like the never-ending task of the Blue Note 15, the Blue Note era LP. So that's like Blue Note 1500 to roughly Blue Note 4250, and the Prestige 7000 series and some of the later ones. But this is one I didn't have in this cover. One of the difficult things about the Prestige, collecting the Prestige of this era, is they had a lot of multiple covers. So the same record could have 3 different covers. So you can get in the weeds a little bit, but this is the Clifford Brown Memorial album. This is the 50th Street Address. Just a absolute cherry cover. Really nice. Add that to my collection. Okay. Also this week I got the 2 new Blue Note Tone Poets, which are great. Won't talk about them too much because you already know. They are all analog. They're cut by Kevin Gray. They sound absolutely fantastic. Typically they're the best sounding the record has ever sounded. So even though I'm as you can see, an avid collector of originals, I still like to listen to the best sounding version possible, and that is why I buy the Blue Note Tone Poets. This is Harold Vick Steppin' Out. So no matter what, I mean, if you want the best sounding, you buy the Tone Poets. If you want something that is kind of like historically, you get that timepiece, what it was sounding like back in the day, if you were listening to it. Not old enough to know what it sounded like back in the 60s. I wasn't alive in the 50s. But, you know, it's historical. I love that aspect of an original pressing. But here's another one. When I want to listen to it I mean, I still listen to them. It's a different experience. It's kind of like the Revolver. You're not going to stop listening to the original Revolver because you like the newest one. And probably the same thing with the Animals, the remix albums. They're not remix albums, but they sound so much different that you almost can get that image in your head. But you're not going to stop listening to the original Revolver, just like I'm not going to stop listening to the original Blue Notes. Okay, the amazing Bud Powell. Really nice, clean, early copy. Actually, this might be an original. Let's see what we got. It's a Plastilite pressing, West 63rd, double deep groove, no ink. Actually, this is a radio station copy. Check that out. Radio station, Knob, Knob. This is 1120 Pine Avenue, Long Beach, California. That's kind of cool. Didn't even notice that. I probably did notice that, but I'm re-noticing. But yeah. We got Knobs, The Amazing Bud Powell, Volume 3. Add that to the collection. Boy. Genius of Modern Music, Thelonious Monk, Volume 2. Now this is a Lexington Avenue copy. This is the early Lexington Avenues. This throws a lot of people off. The earliest Lexington Avenues were not laminate covers. They kind of had, now this is a second cover, but the earlier Lexington Avenues were kind of, it still had a little gloss, but they weren't laminate. You know, when you look at that Art Blakey Monin, that's a later Blue Note. Those are laminate. These are not. But this is still a really nice cover. And although this is probably a first label, yeah, this is not a flat edge. So a little bit later of a pressing, not too much later, but you know, you can get in the weeds on this stuff. But I do not actually have a copy that is this clean and this early. So like I said, collecting these original Blue Notes is just, it's like a never-ending task. There's always a cover that's a slight variation, that's slightly better condition than the one you have, and you just keep collecting. Really nice copy of Hawkwind, Dormi Faso Latido. I have a copy of this. This is a US pressing with a relatively clean cover. These foil covers always got destroyed, so I brought that one home, probably cleaner than the one I have. I'm not an Iron Maiden fan. I always get roasted for this kind of stuff, but I brought this home. I'm adding it to my collection. I don't plan on listening to it, but one day I might actually like Iron Maiden, and I know how difficult it is to find really clean Iron Maiden records in the shrink. I always find myself liking new music and our new old music. So my tastes are ever evolving and ever changing, and there's just certain artists, I know how difficult they are to get. I know how difficult they are to get clean, If my tastes change 5, 10 years from now, I have it on my shelf. If not, I mean, let's be honest, are these like mint Iron Maiden originals going down? No, they're not. So that seems to me like a win-win. The Jesus and Mary Chain, an original, super clean copy of Automatic in the Shrink with the original Tower Records $9.44 price tag. Not my favorite Jesus and Mary Chain record, but it is an original, and I need it for the collection. So this seems like a little bit of a long-winded video, but yeah, there was a lot to show you guys and talk about this week. All right, guys, until next time.